I came to the Riverside Presbyterian Church here in Oakmont in 1988, and we had a good 4 years together. In the middle of that fourth year, two members of what was then the First United Presbyterian Church came to me and said, "You know, we could be stronger as one church if we brought these two Presbyterian churches together, and we could do more for God in this community if we had combined resources." Well, we'd struggled to have a youth group in our church. We'd worked together with the other Presbyterian church to try to have a combined youth group. That really didn't work. So this idea of merging together was really a creative opportunity, I thought. It didn't hurt that the bishop at the time, the Roman Catholic bishop, Bishop Ruefle, was merging all sorts of parishes together. I think there was an Italian and a Polish merger, and I wondered how that would work. So our members, I think, had a good sense that one congregation needed about $250,000 of repairs to their building, and the other congregation was anticipating that their pastor was about to retire. So a lot of factors came together. As we began to talk about this, we realized we had the same insurance carrier, we had the same building use policy in effect, and a lot of things were just well aligned. So our 2 sessions put together a committee that was to study this. And being still a relatively young pastor, I came with this proposal for a study process where we would identify all of the issues, study them, and then make a recommendation on how we would resolve them. One of the wise elders who was a part of the team said graciously, "Steve, I think that's a great proposal that you've brought to us tonight. But I think everyone here thinks merger is a good idea. What if we just put together a merger plan and found out if there were any deal breakers in the process?" So that's what we did. From April through the end of May, we met, developed a proposal, and at the end of May, after only 2 months of conversation, we were ready for a congregational vote. A number of people said we had been eating, drinking, and sleeping this issue, but the congregation really had not, and they weren't ready for a congregational vote. That seemed to make sense. So we took time over that summer to worship together, to have a couple of picnics together, get to know one another a little bit better, and then we had a vote in September. And the vote was in favor of merger. And our first service together was on October 2nd, 1992. Somehow I ended up with the preaching responsibility that day, and I remember the sermon title was, "It's a Beautiful Baby," and talked about the new life of this merged congregation and how it was miraculous and wonderful in its own right, but how it required of us care and nurture and tenderness and diligence, all of those things required of parents of an infant child. And the merger went very well. In many ways, we were a homogeneous group. Some brothers were members of each congregation and sisters, that sort of thing. But people worked really hard to come together. They realized the challenge of being one church, and they were interested to do what they could to make it happen. In the end, we were given the Synod of the Trinity Peacemaking Award that year for our efforts for merging these two congregations. Sometimes merged congregations have the pattern of maintaining the membership of the smaller church 5 years later. We've not done that. We've done pretty well with our membership, and it continues to be a strong church. In worship on a Sunday morning, there are lots of different age groups of people worshiping in our congregation. There's not a lot of racial diversity in our mix, but if you get to know people, you'll see that there is a lot of diversity of other kinds. Education, economic background, the types of work people do is all very different. There's also a broad range of theological viewpoints represented in the church. I've been pleased to think of this congregation as a big umbrella church where people of diverse theological viewpoints are welcome and embraced. So when we come together in worship, we really do gather around the communion table as one people who know that we all stand in need of God's mercy and that no one has every aspect of the truth in their faith. so that we really need one another. Some people are strong in one area of faith but have a weakness in another, but that weakness is shown as a strength in another person. So we're not just tolerant of one another, we really do try to engage each other in these issues. It doesn't mean it always goes smoothly. People feel very strongly about matters of faith, as they should, and so sometimes it really requires of us a patience with one another and a forbearance with those who view matters of faith differently than we do. But when we come together at the table, we really are one people, and we regularly identify ways in which we are one. So I'm pleased that we gather around that table. And as we baptize babies and occasionally baptize adults in this congregation, I'm pleased to know that our congregation is this great resource of viewpoints and understanding of the life in Christ that we can really support and nurture people regardless of their faith perspective. We're ready to nurture and support them in their life in Christ. One of the ministries of our congregation is to support the local food bank. And a person might think a suburban congregation and a food bank, well, sure. There are needs of people in our neighborhoods and in our region that are supplied by a local food bank. And we used to do a food offering twice a year, but then we realized the need was throughout the year. So our deacons procured legally 2 shopping carts that we have in our vestibules. They're not attractive, but they symbolize the need. And so every week, members of the congregation bring food, and then we take it to the food bank. It's a wonderful ministry, and everyone's able to participate in that ministry. One of the great blessings of this congregation is our Board of Trustees. Some boards of trustees, I understand, are protective of the building and resist very much use of the building because it certainly brings wear and tear on the facilities. But ours have always been mission-minded, and we have, for example, 2 recovery groups that meet in our dining room, both that are fairly large, an AA group and another is an NA group. And then a 3rd recovery group meets on a Monday in our congregation in one of the upstairs rooms. And our trustees have dealt year in and year out with various issues that have arisen by people who attend these meetings, who don't always have all of their life together, who sometimes bring children unattended to these meetings, and things happen. But the trustees have been determined. They'll talk with the leaders of the recovery groups, they'll address the problems, and the recovery groups resolve them. And so even though there's additional wear and tear to the building, we feel like not only is it doing good in their lives, but it's something that's spiritually good for them as well. And we're pleased to be the host to 3 recovery group meetings. It seems as if in recent years the Spirit has been particularly active in starting new groups within the life of our church. One of our members tragically had 2 teenage children die in separate years, and it was a very, very painful experience for him. Through that experience, he began to speak at high schools and to parents who had lost children. Through that experience, a group has developed at our church called The Empty Room. And it's a group of people, of parents who've lost children in death in some manner or another, who gather together to try to make sense of their experience and to support one another through the horrendous feelings of grief and loss that they have. It's a wonderful ministry, and that was initiated by one of our members through his own pain. Another group that's developed is called the Lose It for Life group, and perhaps a lot of us could be a part of that group. But it's a group of people who come together and try to mobilize spiritual resources to help them in matters of diet and exercise and a more healthy life. Not just weight, but a more healthy life altogether. And that group has been thriving as well. So this congregation is active in mission both through its individual members and through its life as a congregation, its outreach into the community, and the programs that we provide here at the church. It's great to be part of a congregation that realizes as God sent Jesus into the world, so God sends us into the world as well.